Before I left Arizona, I won a local contest, first place, all expenses paid, one night in Tuba City. This was particularly fortuitous. Second prize was 2 nights in Tuba City. But I happened to meet, while I was there, a really nice little Irish priest who shared a story with me when he heard I was going to Pecos of an archaeologist that he had met a while back. And the archaeologist asked him, well, what would it be like to be an archaeologist in heaven? And the priest said, well, I'll ask the good Lord in my prayers tonight, and I'll let you know tomorrow. So they met up the next day, and the priest says, well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. And the archaeologist says, well, so what's the good news? He says, well, when you're an archaeologist in heaven, every day you do a survey, the sun is shining, all of the ceramics are intact, and all of the petroglyphs are immediately understandable. The archaeologist goes, well, that's great. He says, what's the bad news? He says, well, son, you're on the Lord's survey team in heaven tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. Okay, so brief update. This is literally hot off the press because it happened Monday morning. I exercised a National Park Service permit that I had for Aztec, and with the able assistance of Jeffrey Wharton and a number of other Aztec staff, we were able to measure, survey, and confirm Aztec North as the number 20th Chaco Fractal architecture great house in the Southwest. The recovery of this information is important for several reasons, not the least of which is this is such a fragile site. A lot of people don't know anything about Aztec North because they don't let you in there without a permit. The reason is it's a mud pile. It's adobe, and adobe melts over time. So it turns out that as a fractal architecture, this is the only fractal great house made out of adobe in the Southwest. And as a result, it's a really excellent example of the combination of fractal archaeology and semasiographic iconography. Another reason it's important is specifically because it's on the northern tip of the Chaco Meridian. If you haven't read Dr. Lexon's excellent research on this, you're not paying attention. Aztec North is the only fractal architecture, like I say, that is known to be adobe. It therefore connects, along with this research on the Chaco Meridian, it connects the Chacoan fractal architectural design with Mesoamerican construction techniques. And it does so, it joins a list of a number of other sites that currently is producing greater than 6 sigma levels of intentionality. And finally, the fractal conformation of the structured Aztec throws one more log on the Chaco cultural fire of understanding. This was a 600-year intellectual inheritance that stretched from 850 AD to what we think is the last fractal architecture built at Bandelier in 1450. The fact that 20 sites have been surveyed and confirmed at this point amidst literally hundreds of other architectural examples may represent a minority of designs. But the implications of the presence of fractal geometry and mathematics in a society which had no written language is profound and far-reaching. Just because a minority of sites have been confirmed as fractal only means we have yet to understand the mathematics that they used in the non-fractal sites. As a result of this research, 2 significant mathematical relationships have been identified that were not known to modern mathematics. This is something the Anasazi knew that we didn't. The really big question is, what else did they know? Dr. Lexon once wrote, "Architecture is the central matter of Chaco Canyon." I couldn't agree more. Many unanswered questions regarding Chaco are inherent in the architecture. The research that I've been doing this last year has been to investigate architectural measurements in search of a lost Anasazi unit of measure. Two individuals had already done some significant work in this field. An Englishman in the late 1800s, William Matthew Flinders Petrie, essentially started the baseline for the recovery of ancient measures from architecture. Unfortunately, Petrie in the late 1890s knew nothing of Chaco. The other individual was Dr. Travis Hudson, who in the 1970s attempted to do the same thing and specifically studied Chaco. The good news was he had a lab, he had a computer, but unfortunately he chose to program his algorithm in the designer software of the period, something called Fortran. And regrettably that code has been lost. The good news is he published his data and his results in Kiva some years ago, and included the basic algorithm that he was using for what he called induction metrology, metrology being the umbrella term for capturing ancient measures. His conclusion was that Chaco did indeed have a standard unit of measure, although it changed over time. I was particularly interested in the later results that he had, the late architecture of Chaco, because this was really the peak of when the curvilinear fractal architecture was occurring, basically from about 1000 to 1150. Hudson's analysis suggested that those later designs had a standard unit of measurement of about 24 inches. So I started combining Petrie's baseline approach using Hudson's analysis, and the short of it is I've come pretty much to the same conclusion that Hudson did, that the late stuff was about 24 inches as a standard measurement. The theta diameters of the fractal models are essentially associated with kivas, and this includes the transcendental and algebraic irrationals that are involved with that. All of those tend to be easily divisible by Hudson's suggestion of 2 feet. The spread of precision on this has ranged from about 95 to 97%. Now, I'll be the first to tell you it's probably coincidence, but something else started cropping up as I studied this. There are a number of architectural measurements across the Southwest which have begun to repeat themselves. Zinklitzen and Aztec Kiva E, which is the second largest one in Aztec West, both have a 28-foot dimension in them. Aztec West Great Kiva is 42 feet. Kiva 12 at Pecos is also 42 feet. And the Great Kiva at Bandolera is, wait for it, 42 feet. Based on the presence of confirmed fractal architecture, the Chacoan engineers had about 600 years of experience with fractal mathematics. Our own modern experience with this only began in the 1970s. So we've had about 40 years of experience, and our awareness of Chaco dealing with fractal architecture is only about 5 years old. So after 100 years of archaeological excavations and research, we can't tell you whether 42 feet was important to these people or not. In actuality, we know so little at this point about Chacoan mathematics, it'd be laughable if it weren't so pathetic. So, there's good news and there's bad news. The good news is Chaco is the last cultural enigma in the Southwest, and it turns out geometry is a great big piece of the puzzle. The fact that these architectures were built to exacting fractal design rules is not merely the Chacoan engineers quietly or passively suggesting an idea. They are in fact shouting out to us, this is what we know. That's the good news. If you really want to know what was in the headspace of the Chacoan engineers, if you want to get out of the box that suggests these were just a bunch of guys who were pretty good at piling rocks in creative shapes, you're going to have to take some math classes. Now, this challenge goes out to the younger members here because anybody my age that's signing up for Algebra 101 has a death wish. But consider this, the Chacoan engineers were only 1,000 years ahead of us on this, so there's a lot of catching up to do. The question is it enough? And I would say no, it's not. What we have to remember is that while we find it incredibly exciting to be sorting all this prehistory out, we cannot forget that their descendants are with us today and that they're having a really tough time. This year in particular has been particularly difficult for Native Americans. As I drove here this week, I saw, I think just outside of Shiprock, a big billboard that said 1 out of 3 Native American women are sexually assaulted every year. Prometheus is still promoting their anti-Native American agenda on cable 5 nights a week and on Netflix 24/7. There are communities in Hopi which have no schools. Both Democrat and Republican voters were disappointed in their respective parties last year when the elected representatives advocated and subsequently produced a land swap of sacred Native American lands in Arizona to a foreign corporation. This kind of stuff has got to stop. And what it's going to take is going to be archaeological activists getting involved in the issues of today in order to support the things of the past. One of the ways we can mitigate this, of course, is the recognition of Native American prehistoric science in Chaco and elsewhere in the Southwest. We have to remember recognition delayed is recognition denied.